and welcome back to another edition of the UCDSU Executive Election Interviews. I'm here today with Sarah McGrath, Stage 3 Radiography, and running for the position of Education Officer. Now, you might realise during this interview that some of her questions are answered differently to how they are in her written interview. That's because this is taking place after we did that over email, unlike the rest of the candidates where we took the quotations out of the recorded interview. What positions do you currently hold on campus?
I'm currently the Health Science Officer for the Student Union.
And what experience do you have that you feel qualifies you for the role of Education Officer?
So I've been a class rep for 2 years, Stage 1 and Stage 2, and then this year I've been the Health Science College Officer. So I think from that I've kind of got a good understanding of the running of the Student Union. I've worked quite closely with the current Education Officer this year on a lot of stuff that I've been doing as Health Science College Officer. And I also think that from like my time in college, I've kind of found why there are kind of things that students feel that they don't understand about the Student Union. So a lot to do with educational supports and just people not knowing the things that are available to them, just from like they just don't know what they are or where they are or how to access them. So I've had to access a lot of them in my time, so I know how to do them now. I think it'd be kind of good for students earlier on in their degrees to know about these things, just so that it doesn't kind of at the last minute when stuff starts going wrong to have to go into it, because it can be quite stressful. So I think from my own personal experience and also being involved in the Student Union thus far will kind of help me to just kind of bring awareness to supports that students have.
Okay. And what to you is the single most important part of the role of Education Officer?
Definitely helping like the casework with students. So with students who kind of don't know what to do, it's with results, with grades, with not understanding how things work, and just kind of really explaining to them the supports that are there, making sure they know what they're entitled to, what's available to them, and making sure they know how to access them as well, because even if you kind of list off the supports that students can access, they might not know who it is they have to email, if there's certain forms, things have to be in by certain times, just kind of taking students through that process, because sometimes it can just be daunting to even send the first email to ask for help. So I think really going through that with students is probably the most important part of it.
Do you think this year has been a good year for engagement with UCDSU?
Yeah, I started college during COVID, so obviously engagement was just low in terms of people not being on campus and things like that. So I think in my time in UCD, this has been the best year, but also it's been the year that most things have been kind of back normally in person on campus. But I think it's been one of the better years for engagement. But I do think there's still things that we could do better to kind of reach out to students and things like that.
And what will be your plans to increase engagement with the union?
So I think a lot of people would be kind of just disillusioned with the Student Union. A lot of people wouldn't really be sure what exactly it is that the Student Union does. Like even my friends, when I'm telling them I'm running, are kind of like, what exactly is that? So I think trying to explain to people, but also in an accessible way, what the Student Union do by making it personal to them, because you could rattle off all the different positions and roles that the Student Union do, but it could have nothing to do with that student. So I think just kind of bringing it, making it individual to different courses, to different colleges. You know, one college could have one big issue that the Student Union can help them out with, whereas that could be a totally different issue for a different school. So I think trying to make the Student Union personalised to different colleges, different students and things like that, because that's what people are going to engage with. So I think in that way we kind of help with engagement as well.
So you mentioned lobbying for increased accuracy across extenuating circumstances in your manifesto.
Yeah.
Where do you see it currently lacking accuracy?
So in terms of how extenuating circumstances works, where you send in your application and it gets approved by the program board from the school that it's in, there could be two students from two different schools who apply for the exact same circumstances, and one gets approved and one doesn't, and it's just up to that board to decide whether they feel it's appropriate or not. And I know that some boards are a lot stricter than others, so in terms of the policy, I'd like it to be reviewed in what schools are accepting as reasonable extenuating circumstances or that get approved. Because I don't think it's fair that, you know, someone gets approved because they're just in a different school, whereas someone who could have applied with the exact same circumstances doesn't get approved just because they applied in their school. So I think there kind of just needs to be more transparency in how that works, and what schools will accept as extenuating circumstances.
And what would you kind of like to see brought in terms of policy?
For the extenuating circumstances, I would ideally like to lobby for a review of the policy, and then also for it to be created kind of a transparent list of kind of things that they will accept for extenuating circumstances. But a lot of times students don't even know what they can put in, and they'll say to me, oh, I want to apply for this, and I'm like, that's part of extenuating circumstances, and they don't even know that they're allowed to apply for that reason. They think it's only kind of very extreme things, but there are lots of things you can apply extenuating circumstances for. So I think kind of giving more transparency in what they accept will make it better.
You mentioned wanting to review lecture material accessibility. A full review of that across all colleges would be a very large undertaking. So how would you try to ensure this happens on a 1-year term? So
I don't think it's going to be feasible to do an entire review of that in 1 year. That's a enormous kind of undertaking. But overall, I do think like accessible lecture materials works well, but there does come up like particular instances where it's not working, or certain schools and things like that where it doesn't work as well. So I'd like to work with the class reps next year to kind of go through if this is a common area in a certain school, or if it's certain kind of areas and things like that, or is it just things in certain buildings that don't work as well as they do in other buildings, and that's the reason why it's not working. So I think full review is not going to be feasible in 1 year, whereas I think if we can pinpoint, kind of just do an assessment through the class reps of where this isn't working, and I think then it'll be easier to kind of pinpoint where these things aren't working and then address them on a case-by-case basis.
So by what methods would you attempt to kind of ensure diversity and participation across like the college boards?
Yeah, so from sitting on a lot of program boards myself, it tends to be a lot of the same people who who end up sitting on boards and things like that. So fair play to all the people who sit on boards, like it's great, but I think in terms of increasing diversity and participation across these things, it's important that people feel that they can sit on boards. A lot of people wouldn't want to because, it's a time commitment, but B, it's the knowing what to say, knowing what to do. This is a room where you're sitting with people who are your lecturers, who are staff, who are in charge of your academics and things like that, and people maybe wouldn't feel that they have the knowledge to be in these boards. They're kind of scared to bring anything up, they don't know what to say, so I think the union needs to do a better job of reaching out to students to make them feel that they will be supported, they do have a voice, and they should use it on these boards. So I think reaching out to students as soon as kind of college starts to be like, explain exactly what a rep is, but also making sure that they know that when you sit on a board, like we'll train you in exactly what to say, like explain what the kind of the terms of membership at the board are, and how the agendas work, and how to bring things up in a way that is acceptable at boards and stuff like that. So I think it's a lot to do with kind of giving people the confidence and the tools to feel that they can sit on boards, because a lot of time I feel students don't want to because they're not sure what they would say. They're kind of uncomfortable with the fact that it's a lot of people who are lecturers, and if they're so I think that would be a good way to kind of give people the tools and confidence to be able to do that.
Okay, so in what way would you say that student placements currently kind of lack equity?
Yeah, so in terms of from being health science officer, this is obviously a lot of what I've been doing over the past year, talking to students about their placements and kind of figuring out the differences in how the placements are treated throughout different courses. So there is a complete lack of kind of cohesiveness throughout the placements. There are some placements that are run really well, and students are given all these supports in terms of putting them up in hotels, and they get meal vouchers and all these things, whereas there are other placements where there is no financial support, and they're sent up and down the country with there's no help. They're just kind of told where to go, and that's them, they have to sort it out, whereas it's then their friends or counterparts who are in a different course are getting these other supports and kind of extra accommodations as well. So it creates a lot of disparity between courses. I mean, they haven't even entered their profession yet, and they're already kind of being pitted against each other, for some people receiving some things, some people not, and it's just a complete lack of disparity between all the different courses. So I have done a lot of work this year in terms of trying to figure out exactly what people receive, what people don't receive, and then kind of putting it all together. So what I'd like to do is kind of bring the information that I've gathered this year to the university and kind of further into like government and things like that, to kind of say, you know, you have created a complete disparity between all these courses and there's no real reasoning for it. Like, placement is placement, it doesn't matter what course you're in. So I want there to kind of be more cohesiveness between placements. You know, you can't just give someone one thing and then give someone else nothing just because they're in a different course. Where they're all on placement, it's all the same. So I would love to kind of lobby for a placement policy where the schools have to agree that if you're sending students out into placement, out to work in hospitals, clinics, wherever it is, you can't just give some people something and some people nothing. There has to be kind of cohesiveness in the policy, and you can't, you know, create such disparity between all the different courses for that reason.
Resit and repeat fees have been reduced several times over the past kind of 6-7 years. What further reduction, you mentioned wanting further reductions, what would you like to see in regards to that? And how likely do you think the university is to acquiesce to like requests for further reductions?
Yeah, so they have definitely come down, and they're going to come down further hopefully. So I think but they're still really high. You know, there's still universities where they don't have to pay for resit fees, for repeat fees as well. So it's just UCD that are deciding these fees. You know, it's modelled in other colleges that they don't have these. So while they're coming down, which is great, ideally they don't need to be there at all, because the grade cap and the kind of, you know, academic burden that it puts on students for having to do this in the first place, I think is enough, rather than financially burdening students as well. It's also a cost of living crisis. If students are failing exams, you know, there's a myriad of reasons why that's happening, and putting extra financial pressure on students to have to resit their exams or repeat their modules is really not going to help them at all. If anything, it's going to create more stress, more financial pressure on them that they don't need. So whether the university wants to kind of work on it or not, this is something that needs to keep being campaigned for. But also the fact that it keeps coming down means that the university does know that it does need to keep coming down, and I'd eventually like them to be gone completely. But I think because they keep coming down, the university does keep having to acknowledge that the fees are too high and they need to kind of keep lowering them. So I'd ideally like to work towards them being abolished completely, but we might have to take it in baby steps with the university.
So UCDSU and UCD Library has had a really positive looking relationship over the past few years professionally.
Yeah.
How important as education officer would you say like maintaining that positive relationship is?
Yeah, I think it's like really, really important. The library does some amazing stuff in terms of plagiarism, academic supports, like the research librarians, everything like that. Like, they do great stuff, and I think it works really well in terms of the role of education officer in linking up with the library, in kind of they have access to things and I have access to things as well, and I would as education officer. So kind of working together, I think it kind of helps students as well, because they can also see the link between the library and the student union. Whereas, you know, if you're involved with the student union, then you didn't know about the library services, the student union are bringing you to them, and if you're in the library and happen to see that the student union are working with them as well, it kind of brings both sides of it together. And even in terms of this year, the library fees being waived, like that was something that we worked together with the library on, and I think it's great. It also shows like the great working relationship between the student union and the library, that they, you know, can listen to things that we bring up and we can work together to kind of find solutions to this. So I think based off of those positive working relationships, it kind of just feels that we can kind of keep going and do more, and also kind of just keep working together.
And so you mentioned wanting to work with the new VP of Sustainability when they're brought in, in your manifesto. What would you like to see them bring in kind of at academic level, not undergraduate level?
I think making sustainability just an integral part of the courses, making sure that at every opportunity you're asking the question, can we make this more sustainable? Is there a better way that we could be doing this that, you know, works better in terms of sustainable development goals, in terms of, you know, integrating like sustainability into academics. So I think the VP for Sustainability will create that voice of at every opportunity to kind of bring up sustainability into these kind of, management meetings, things like that, there's someone there to kind of raise that question at every opportunity that's possible, because there's such room to bring that into different places in terms of buildings, in terms of modules, just kind of overall how the university works, that there's room to bring that question up at every interval. And I think that them being there will kind of be a great way to be able to do that, and also just kind of coordination between all the various climate groups, sustainability groups, because we have green campus and things like that, but we need to kind of make sure that sometimes there's a lot of resources but they're not coordinated together. So I think it'd be good for the VP for Sustainability to kind of also work with all these different groups, but also bring them together, because I think there'd be a lot of room for collaboration and stuff there as well.
So a lot of the goals you mentioned in your manifesto are more long-term and policy-based.
Yeah.
How would you try to ensure that could be come to fruition during your single-year term?
Yeah, so in my experience as health science officer, things can often take us longer than I want them to. So I think in terms of, you can almost be more effective in creating blueprints and the long-term plans for things than you can in just rushing something through because you just want to get it done in your time period. It's something that I kind of have to work on in terms of slowing things down, making sure you kind of integrate with all the groups that you need to, get kind of input from as many people as possible before you just plow ahead with your idea. So while a lot of them are more longer term, I think it kind of sets a more solid basis for ensuring that things are done the right way, ensuring that you've kind of gone about including everybody who needs to be included in these conversations, reaching out to different groups, societies, communities, things like that. So I think it's kind of, although it's slower, almost a better way to kind of make sure that the plans are kind of seen through as well, because the more people you engage with, the more people who are involved with them, that when you're not there kind of next year or whatever, that there's further people who will kind of continue the work as well. So I think that's a good part of it.
And what, if elected, would be your number one priority in the role of education officer?
I definitely think highlighting and coordinating the academic supports that we have available, and then from that being able to identify where we need to do better. So like I said, students not being aware of things that they have, not knowing how to access them. I think we just need to reach kind of go-to students as well, like I said, in terms of different kind of academic supports being needed in different areas. So bringing one thing to the School of Medicine, bringing one thing to the School of Engineering, like there's different areas that they'll need to focus on that'll kind of be overarching themes in those schools. So I definitely think bringing and showing academic supports to those schools kind of on a more personalised basis will kind of show students what they have access to and how to be able to access them as well.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much.